Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. All right, welcome back for episode 218 of the Freight 360 podcast. If you're brand new, you got a whole bunch of other episodes to check out. Go over to the website, freight360.net, hit up that search bar, or go to the resources section and just start listening, reading, watching, all that good stuff. Share us with your friends, leave us a comment, send us a question, all that good stuff. And if you want to learn more about us, check out the Freight Broker Basics course, everything you need to start and succeed in this industry. This episode is brought to you by Blue Book Services. Blue Book is the resource you need if you're transporting fresh produce. Their online database contains thousands of companies throughout the produce industry supply chain. You can easily search their database to get new sales leads. Their credit ratings also help you avoid companies with high credit risk, and their team can help you resolve disputed loads. To learn more, go to producebluebook.com and click join today. That's producebluebook.com. Ben, happy middle of November here, man. Do you know it's like 60 degrees in Buffalo today? I'm wearing shorts. It's great.
It's probably seems a little warmer. It's been raining for 2 days, and even though the temp's probably a little warmer than that, it definitely feels like northeast weather. Yeah, 75, really, really windy and rainy all day. Like literally just rain all day today, tomorrow, and yesterday. So
gotcha. Yeah, we got like a couple days. I feel like 2 to 3 days of warm. Well, I call 60 warm, but, you know, nicer weather for November, and then we're going to head into the abyss, I'm sure. But it is what it is, man. Great weather to put Christmas lights up. Planning on doing that this week, so we'll knock that out. Can't believe Thanksgiving's right around the corner as well. But, you know, here we are. Sports, Bills suck. They should fire everybody. And luckily we did fire Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator. We're 5-5. It's freaking embarrassing. If you guys ever watch the show Letterkenny, where there's like the hockey coach that just always yells and says like, "This is embarrassing," and like kicks garbage cans. It's literally how my wife and I felt Tuesday after being at the Monday night game, and pretty much everybody in Buffalo. So who knows, man? 5-5. Bills could go 5-12 or 12-5.
Maybe it's a long season.
It's really bad, really bad. But hey, there's a lot of teams that are like competing for wild card spots in the AFC. So, I mean, we'll see how the next few weeks match up. But the Bills got a pretty tough schedule ahead of them. Not looking too good this year. But, yeah.
Surprised the Steelers came out with a win. Kind of didn't expect it.
Yeah.
It was a great game. A lot of the games have been good recently. I mean, mostly because no one kind of expected them to pull them
Kenny
off.
Pickett, man.
Found a way to win, even though
it is nice to see the Steelers. Like, you haven't seen a good Steelers team since Big Ben's era. You know what I mean? Yes. And it's refreshing, man. Refreshing.
We shall see. A lot of games. Next week's going to be a decent game, and then the week after that, we're playing Steven's team. So we got road through Ohio the next
rivalry there. Hockey, you see we talked about it a couple weeks ago. The player that got skate to the neck died. They arrested the other player to investigate him like yesterday, I want to say it was. So, yeah. Wow. Basically saying it could be manslaughter. Like, he may have intended to try and like not hit him in the neck, but to hit him somewhere with his leg. And so we'll see, man. There has been like players that have been disciplined for like injuries like that. Not like a death, but not that I'm aware, but there's a dude that got assault like, I don't know, 20 years ago maybe for like choke holding a player or like, I don't know, basically just beating the crap out of somebody, cheap shotting, and they got an assault charge. So there was another guy that had assault with a deadly weapon for bashing somebody with a stick or something like that. I forget, but yeah.
I don't want to go on a tangent, but I don't know if you guys were baseball fans back in the day or historic baseball fans. Like, I really like a lot of old baseball stuff, and some of the cards I still have are like literally go back like the 20s. But did you guys ever see the movie Ty Cobb or know anything about him when he played?
I've never seen the movie. I know the name. My sports history with baseball is pretty weak, though.
Great movie. I think it was Tommy Lee Jones that played him. Anyway, really good actor. But long story short, he was one of the dirtiest players, I think, probably in the league, at least, with the stories. He used to sharpen his spikes right in the dugout so that when he would slide, he would literally kick someone in the shins as hard as he could. So nobody wanted to tag him. And that was one of the main reasons why he got so many bases, because that was what he did. But again,
Dude,
that
wild.
was way back in 100 years ago, give or take. So
yeah, crazy. Moving on to I guess positive news. The Bills are playing the Jets this weekend, which I don't know why I'm saying that's positive, because we literally lost to them week 1. But yeah, and also we played Denver, who we should have beaten. But hoping to be maybe a little slump buster here, right? Get us back over 500. We'll see. I'm taking the Bills.
Saying there's a chance.
Yeah, saying there's a chance. That's right. I'm taking the Bills. I think they're 7-point favorites. They're playing at home, 4:30 on Sunday. Give me the Bills all day long. I want to see the new offensive coordinator, something Brady. I just remember the joke yesterday or this week was like, oh, we got a guy with the last name Brady heading up the Bills offense. Woohoo. Because Tom Brady, because he's always been our nightmare. But anyway, we'll see. All right, news. This came from the TIA earlier this week. So basically, the September Department of Labor had this new wage proposed rule about certain workers having changes in their wage, right? And they had this test about exempt versus non-exempt employees on how they could be comped and what their wage had to be. TIA sent back some requests and proposals stating things like, we want to make sure that compensation of all forms is included in that, like bonuses, commissions, spiffs, anything like that. Because you think about a brokerage where somebody might be 100% commission once they had a certain goal, right? And 100% of their earnings are based off of a percentage of gross profits. And in that case, they would fail this wage and labor test being proposed by Department of Labor. So curious to see how that pans out. I'm just glad to see, I'm reading more and more of the TIA's press releases and all their news stuff. I guess I didn't realize how much of an advocate and how involved they really are in the federal landscape of our industry. And I guess that's kind of the reason we all pay them a lot of money to be members and to be advocates for us, but love to see them doing some good things there. Did you see this came out on a newsletter as well, the positive trends in the freight industry? 73% of merchants said that they expect higher sales this peak season. So like your Thanksgiving into Christmas and New Year's, and overall market is predicted to grow 3 to 4% for the peak season this year over year overall. It's a sign of just good things, I'll take anything as long as it's not declining at this point. But an increase sure is a glimmer of hope. So, Ben, what have you seen rate-wise? Any movement specific to whether it's the tanker side of the business or anything general freight, any kind of movement?
I'm not seeing a lot of movement, but I am seeing that they're starting to track with what they do every year this quarter, and expected to go up probably on average around 25 cents a mile across the market leading up into Christmas, which is about what it does every year. So about the same percentage increase in average rate per mile is what was expected. I know that was what Dean put out on Sunday, and the charts were trending in that same direction. But there were some other positive news as it relates to the economy. The consumer price index showed inflation pulling back to 3.2 from 3.7, which was good. A lot of that, though, was because gas prices went down about 5%.
What is that, like an inflation measure?
Yeah, the consumer price index is the inflation number that strips out food and energy. And that's the one, core inflation was down to 4 from 4.1. The CPI, Consumer Price Index, is the one that when you hear the Fed say, hey, we're trying to get 2% inflation, that's the number they're talking about, the Consumer Price Index.
Is that an annual measure, like a 2% annual?
So it's year over year, I believe,
Oh,
or
okay.
it could be month. I can't remember off the top of my head. If it goes, that is for October. I'm certain it's the data is for October, but I think it's compared
October of
to the
last
month
year.
before, or it might be the year before, and I don't know off the
I
top of
doubt
my
it would be the
head.
month before, because if you got 2% per month, you're looking at 24% inflation per
Yeah.
year. There's got to be an annual measurement.
Yes. I
Any of
mean,
you statistics or finance nerds out there that know this stuff, hit us up. We'll bring you on the show and we'll talk all about it. Maybe if
yeah.
you're, unless you're like I don't know, like a Chiefs fan or something. Just kidding.
Well, the other good news,
Go
right,
Taylor
was
Swift.
that I think there is almost 100% sentiment right now in the market that the Fed won't raise rates definitely by the end of the year. And the other one I read was that like there's an expectation now amongst bulls in the market that the Fed will cut rates 3 times in 2024. So again, there's a long way to go because we're in the difficult part, but a lot of the pundits and people that read this all think that we may really have a chance to have a soft landing, which means to pull back
I don't think we already
inflation.
did.
No, to pull back inflation to 2% without driving the GDP into a recession. 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, right, is technically a recession. And we're not at the 2% mark and we're getting close to it. So it seems like we're coming in, but the big number.
I was thinking you meant bottom of the market in general. So you're saying the market's going to get worse?
No, what I'm saying is the overall economy, right? The biggest thing for the reason interest rates are being pushed up, which makes it harder for companies to do business, pull money out of the economy, all of these things, right? In order for them to come down, inflation has to hit 2%. So the belief is they are high enough that if they keep them there, inflation will keep trending to 2 without them having to move them up at all.
Ending instead of a hard like whoosh.
And then, yes, because in 80 years, I was reading this last night, it has never happened. They've never been able to pull inflation into a line of target where it's supposed to be, without driving the economy into a recession. It's never happened. But it could happen now, and it looks like it is happening. The one real thing that I think everyone's looking at is like what consumer spending looks like, because people are still spending money at kind of the same pace.
But how much now, though? That's what a lot of the stats have said, right?
Yes, but how much they have in savings has gone down. Like the average percentage in saving was like 5.5% last month. Now it's at like 3.7. So the big question is, are consumers going to spend what they normally do for the holidays? I think the expectation is going to be somewhere between 2022 and 2021. 2021 was like extremely high because we were all in our houses. We spent like twice as much as we did the next year during the holiday season. The expectation is that we're going to spend about the same as what we did last year. But the big question is like, when is everyone going to either run out of money or are they going to start borrowing from credit cards to keep the spending up before we hit the 2% target of inflation? Because that's when they'll hopefully bring rates down and speed everything back up. That is because this is, everybody always asks, like, what's determining rates? It's the carriers leaving the market, which is happening every week, which is going to tighten the market up and drive rates up eventually. The other side is how much goods are being bought in the country to be moved on the trucks. And this is the big determinant, is what is happening with these few numbers to determine how much and what companies are going to produce and how much of it we're going to buy, right? So,
yeah, for sure. Well, good deal, man. Let's shout out DAT and talk prospecting questions.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the industry. You'll get real-time rates on every lane, so you'll know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year with the link in the show notes for DAT1.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to talk about questions to ask prospects on the phone or in person or via email, whatever way you're communicating. This is typically going to be done over the phone, though. Not just that first call, but subsequent follow-up conversations as well. Yep. We've got a ton of content on questions to ask. We want to really talk through different types of questions, when it's appropriate to ask these questions. Not every single call with every single customer in every industry is going to be the exact same too, right? As you if you have a conversation with somebody in the oil and gas industry, you're going to probably be asking some different niche questions than you would if you're talking to somebody that's in the produce industry. Actually, funny side note, I was getting a haircut today, and we were just talking about like work and what we do or like what I do in my line of work. And I mentioned logistics and whatnot, and she's like, "Oh, that's cool." She's like, "I used to work sales and marketing in a similar kind of company. We were a produce broker," and I was like, "Oh, freight broker." She's like, "Oh, I used to use you guys all the time." But we started talking about it, and it was really funny because, to my point here, the stuff that she was asking me about was strictly produce related, and it had no application to anything outside of like the fresh fruit and vegetable realm. Well, that's all she knew. So I thought it was kind of interesting. But to my point is, these questions, these are going to be generic and general, but they can be applied specific to the kind of person that you're dealing with, whatever their position is, maybe where they're located, the time of year, the kind of commodity. Like if you ask a question, for example, about how the winter weather is affecting, inbound, outbound shipping for a certain company, if they're in the Northeast, probably applicable, right? If they're in South Florida, very much unlikely. So yeah, you're not going to ask.
Depends on where they deliver to.
This is true. Yeah, this is true, right? Yeah. But yeah. So anyway, Ben, I want to let you kind of kick it off here. You got a good bunch of bullet points in our notes here. I mean, you've over the years have put together a pretty solid, what I would call like a playbook of questions, different style, different types of questions and whatnot.
Yes.
I do want to kind of start off by, just overarch saying that these will be, like I said, they're going to be different for everybody, but they're also spread out over multiple conversations. Don't rapid fire like interview style, like blow somebody up like it's like they're in the hot seat. So
yes. And that's what I'm going to cover first, right? Is the time frame at which these would be applied to, right? Which is probably one of the more overlooked things. And people, you'll get excited. I might have done this too, or I've asked probably more than you need to, right? But one of the important things, like think about the journey of your prospect when you're reaching out to them, right? What does the sales cycle look like between, I don't know anybody at this company and we are doing business, right? What happens in between those two things is what we're going to talk about, right? So step one, find somebody to reach out to. You're going to reach out and call them cold. That's your step one, right? Well, between that and doing business with them, we kind of talk that it's usually between 8 and 12 conversations or touches over on average 2 to 3 months, right? So the first thing to realize is if your expectation should be aligned with that, meaning do not expect that your customers are going to start giving you loads or do business with you in a couple days or a couple weeks. So when you have properly aligned expectations, you're going to be a lot less frustrated with prospecting. You're not going to get frustrated every day that somebody isn't giving you business because you shouldn't expect it, right? What you should be able to do is turn all of this into processes and procedures that turn into habits that you just execute every day. You don't really have to think as much about it. It's just, I'm going to call these people. I need to follow up with these people that I've already called that my CRM tells me I need to follow up with. And these are the new people I call every day. So your day should look very similar. The mix of cold outreach versus follow-up changes as you do more and more of this, right? But it shouldn't change for you. For your prospect, though, that's what you want to think about is what does it look like to them? And you don't want to be forcing them to try to get comfortable or trust you before they know you, right? The biggest hurdle to overcome as a freight broker in order to get them to do business with you is trust. They don't know you, so they have no reason to trust that you'll do what you say you're going to do, even if you are an honest person, right? Now, later down the line, every time you move a load, that trust gets a little higher. And ironically, if something goes wrong, those are your real opportunities to prove they can trust you, because everybody can communicate clearly when it's easy and everything's going well. What they're worried about is when things go wrong, are you going to have the character to pick up the phone, call them, and own up to either a mistake you have made? I've made them too. We all have, and we're all going to again. Or maybe that your driver or in the paperwork, or maybe it was outside of your control, but that is their risk. And that's what they're fearful of, right? So really, no amount of talking is going to make that go away, but we can reduce it to get them to understand and know that you have similar values, which sounds cheesy, but it's true, right? We all have friends, and you think of everybody you know and you talk to. Your friends at 40 weren't probably the same at 20. You know why? Because you have different values. Same at 30, same at 15, right? As we grow and we change, we have different things that are important to us that weren't then, that aren't now. That's the same in business, right? So realizing this is your time frame, 2 to 3 months, you're going to need to talk to these people a lot. So you don't want to ask them every question you can, even if they're willing to answer them in one call, because this is the thing you really want to avoid, is the dreaded follow-up phone call after that of every week going, hey, just calling to check in. How's it going over there? You got some loads for me? Nope. Okay. And then you just end up doing that every other week, and hopefully there's nothing to talk about, right? So you want to save some ammunition, right, for yourself, for your follow-ups, right?
Exactly. So let's kind of start off at the beginning of the sales cycle.
Yes.
In my opinion, I would, and let me see, I don't know what you call them. I'd call them like qualifying questions. I don't think you had listed that, but in any kind of sales role, right, we got to find out, is this customer qualified to do business with? Because we might think just because a company is shipping something that they need a freight broker. Well, that might not be the case.
Yep.
You might find out that they don't have enough volume where a freight broker is going to be a value add for them. They might not move the kind of freight that you're experienced in and have the ability to properly move. They might want a lot of stuff done intermodal or drayage or LTL, and you're just strictly full truckload domestic.
Yes.
They also might have some companies right now have a no onboarding of new brokers currently, which could mean that at the current time, they're not qualified, but you could potentially flip them later on as things change. So let's talk about some of those initial questions of how you can start to probe through and have a conversation with a customer. Do you have any go-tos that you're a big fan of?
So 2 things. One is, before you're going to qualify, you have to open the call, right? So what I do is take a look. I did a video on this, cold call openings, a few weeks ago, that you can find. It literally has the structure of how you can walk through it, right? With I use an example of a carrot, a takeaway, and then giving them a time frame to be able to open this call and to really get them to talk a little bit, right? So take a look there. We talked about this topic a lot on what you can say in an opening, right? Either I got trucks in the area, I have people delivering, we share a mutual customer, I've delivered to your location before. There's lots of things you can do.
Back calls, yada.
Yeah, back calls. And we've covered a lot. And again, there's a whole video to do that. So let's say you've gotten through your opening, right? And to your point, you need to qualify, because your biggest risk, right? Your biggest asset as a freight broker is your time. It's not money. It's how many minutes are you going to spend working this prospect in the future? And you want to make sure it's worth the opportunity, right? In my mind, I think prospecting literally 150 years ago, guy digging for gold, right? You want to know if that's the right hole before you dig a 12-foot hole, right? You'd want to know somewhere feedback to know, oh, I found some gold, I'll keep going, right? Because if you spend all your day in one spot, you're not likely to find what you're looking for, right? So your qualifying questions determine, is there gold or opportunity here, right? So my go-tos are, and I'm going to learn these at a big box brokerage, right? Hey, have you guys ever used a brokerage in the past for any reason? Peak season, down season, for any reason? If they have, it's pretty good likelihood that they have, especially coming off the pandemic. Almost everybody had to. So that's a pretty easy bar to get over. The second one is, hey, if you're focusing on full truckload, ask them, do you guys ship full truckload, right? That's your easiest question to ask. But the more important one is, to me, what is their weekly volume of full truckloads?
Yeah.
Because if you're shipping
how many
2
trucks
or 3
are going out a day, a week, right? That's what you definitely want to know.
Right. And I think my best strategy, or the thing I like the best, is if I ask them, hey, what are you guys shipping this week? That seems like a question that is very close to them having to tell me what they're doing right now. And that feels like I'm asking for something that they maybe don't know if they trust me enough to tell me yet. But if you ask it behind you in reference to time, almost everybody will. Hey, I was just curious, Jimmy. Hey, last year, what were you guys averaging shipments per week? Ballpark, kind of like peak season versus low season? What were you guys averaging around the summer? How did your summer go? How was the fall? I always pick a time frame behind me and just ask it very nonchalant. Hey, just out of curiosity, I know you guys do some full truckload, or at least I assumed you do. Well, do you guys do that? And hey, what was your volume around the spring? Was that expected? Do you expect it to pick up into the fourth quarter? Because that seems really conversationally, and usually they'll tell you. And again, if it's 2 or 3 a week, they're almost never going to have a need that is that important to use a broker where they couldn't just call a bunch of carriers and wait for that guy to pick up, or when they can first send a truck,
Or if they do, don't expect, that's not going to be the kind of customer that's going to be a huge breadwinner for you. You might have like a load a month. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Doesn't mean totally turn them down, but your level of your level of focus and attention on that should be considerably less than a more qualified customer.
So again, like I think to me, if you're doing full truckload, you should be doing at least 20 a week for it to be a decent opportunity. And again, there are exceptions to this. I've had clients that ship 10 a month, but they're very high service needs and they're willing to pay margin and they want to pay a broker to make sure it's done right. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to talk to carriers. They want one person to handle all of it and they're willing to pay for it. Those are your exceptions. They are there. Mostly I found them in construction, but I'm sure they're elsewhere. So, always, these are rules of thumb. These are not applicable to every situation, right?
Yep. Some of the stuff that I like to, when just kind of exploring how their logistics and traffic department works, is I like to understand personnel, what their roles are, how kind of lead time they have, because we know the volume, but how early do they know they need a truck, right? And then also how flexible is their customer with, delivery and times and stuff like that. I like to really get an idea and try to visualize what is it like to be in that facility when something is getting loaded or a truck is being, they're looking for a truck to book.
For sure. So I would bucket those under operational questions and I'll come up with some examples. But before I want to read those, I want to go, so we went from openings. The next stage is prospect focus questions, right? So these are questions, and I used some examples a moment ago, but they're just general questions about business. Hey, you make hockey sticks. Hey, how's season been? You guys expecting some big orders this year? How'd it go last year? Was that in line with what you guys were expecting, right? Hey, saw you guys open a new plant in the news or down the street. Hey, saw this. Whatever it is that is a general business question related to that company. Oh, they're a baker. Hey, how's the bread? Whatever it is, right? Those are very easy questions to ask and to get somebody to answer because they're not about anything anybody's trying to protect information-wise, and they're more than willing to share the good news about their business. They'll be happy to talk about that. So those are really great to transition from an opening, once you've qualified, into some general questions about the company's business, right? What are you guys expecting? Has it been a good year? Right? Keep them very high level, very, kind of nonchalant, and you'll get them into a pattern of kind of talking to you. Oh yeah, it's been pretty good. Or, hey, it wasn't like what we expected, hoping for picking up. The general conversations you would have with somebody you kind of just met over coffee or in an elevator, right? Gets them into the flow. Because now we're going to switch into what you said, right? Operational.
Well, even before you do that, this is a great time. Look at the market and the economy right now. A lot of companies have seen drastic changes in how business has operated for them. When we were talking about this with a group of TIA folks earlier today, but it's a great conversation starter. Hey, obviously, the economy has been just nuts the last year and a half. How's that been for you guys? What are you guys projecting how to close this year out versus last year and versus next year? So just as a side note there, that's a current relevant question to ask.
And it's huge because remember, you build rapport and trust with them, not by giving them answers. You build it by getting them to talk with a question and then listening.
Yeah, these are open-ended questions too. They're not yes or no.
Yes.
They're open-ended.
For sure. And I'm going to go through a list of just operational questions. I'm going to go through them pretty quick. You guys can pause or re-listen to this or download the script later. But some operational questions. Can you tell me a little bit more about your shipping, how it's organized? How much notice or time do you normally or usually get to have to organize a truck to pick up your load from when you guys receive the order? How many full truckloads do you guys ship on an average week? Any LTL? What about your busy season? Well, when is your busy season? When is your slow season? How do you guys usually find your trucks? How much time do you usually spend finding those trucks on a last minute load? How many locations do you have? Does that include distribution centers? What commodities do you guys ship? Anything else? What are the values? What kind of trucks and equipment do you typically require? Are there any special requirements? Do you do inbound and outbound from these locations? Does your facility arrange that? Is your shipping arranged out of a central office, or does each location handle their own independently? What are some common or tough lanes that you arrange? Are certain lanes assigned to certain carriers? And how do you guys decide who gets what? Do your loads have any special requirements or anything unusual like a pallet exchange, weight, unloading, tarps, dunnage, etc., right? It's a pretty comprehensive list that you could use.
Yeah, I mean, some other ones, I don't know if I missed these at all, but like first come, first serve, right? Is there a requirement for setting an appointment? Yeah, I mean, I think value. Did you talk about value of the cargo?
Yes, value of cargo, values per shipment. Is that standard for all of your shipments? Is that some? Because what you're trying to do in operational is you're trying to understand what the operations look from that person's point of view, right? And again, the point that I want to make is that we always kind of assume that a shipper, all of their freight is created equal. It's not. Some is more important than others. Some they'll pay margin for. Some they aren't willing to pay because they don't need to. Some of their loads go to a customer and they care that a driver shows up, looks professional, and acts professional. Sometimes it goes to a distribution center they own and they don't care. They want somebody to get it there cheap and they don't care at all. Price matters more than service. So you've got to ask these questions to understand how and what they determine are their criteria for each of their loads. When they change, when they don't change, right? Yep. Because your operational questions give you the foundational understanding to move into the next category, which are challenge questions, right? And these questions are to elicit issues, frustrations, concerns, or what they really care about. The key is you want to try to avoid using the word like problem or need. Because if you go, hey, do you have any problems? What are your needs?
Yeah, I like the word change. That's like a good one. So basically what you would want to identify is if they could change anything that would make their life better or easier, what would these things be? And there's a lot of ways to ask these.
For sure. And one of my favorite ways to ask that specific question is like, hey, out of curiosity, I mean, hey, let's say you had a magic wand. I mean, and you could wave that magic wand. What was one thing you might change? Because usually when you say, how are your carriers? Remember, they chose those carriers. They picked them. So if they're going to badmouth them, that is basically a knock on their own performance. They're not just going to, pardon my French, shit talk their carriers, even if they aren't performing, because they picked them most cases in the first place, right? Yep. So these questions are designed to take the operational questions and pull them closer to a frustration or a concern, right?
I also like to ask too, because I asked them, what they change. I also like to set a positive stage, because to your point, if they pick these carriers, I like to ask things like, what do you love? Like your best carriers and brokers, what is it that you love about them?
Yes.
Because then you can kind of tell what's important to them, right?
I used to use you as an example when I would teach this in trainings. It's a technique that if you go positive enough, eventually that person is forced to tell you the negative. And if I sat with you, I used to do the example, I'd be like, if I asked Nate what he loved about the Bills, he's going to tell me something. And I ask him again, he'll tell me something. Eventually, he will run out of those positive things and he will start telling me things he wished they would do better. And eventually he will tell me things that he's not happy with at all, right? So you can literally stay on the positive side and you don't seem like you're going negative, and they will give this to you all the same, right?
Yep.
Some examples, right? What kind of issues or frustrations might you deal with when you guys are hauling your freight? This is that question. If you could change one thing about your current carriers, what might it be? What was the last major issue you dealt with in regard to your transportation? What is the most important to you about your freight or your loads? The current carriers you use, they always deliver on time, right? And they're pleasant to deal with. What concerns may you have about them, right? Or you don't have any challenges with finding reliable trucks, right? I mean, what about weekends? Holidays? I mean, you got a lot of those coming up. Weekends? Which lanes do you guys possibly struggle with? Your current carriers or brokers, they don't ever drop loads, or hell, none of your brokers ever give you a load back, do they? Right? How do rates affect the quality of, this is one of my favorite. How do the rates affect the quality of the carriers you're using? You have no idea how surprised I am that most people don't understand that there's a correlation between what they're paying and the service they get with the carriers they use, right? I mean, how often have you seen that one?
Yeah, that's big. I also want to point out too, just like anytime we talk about scripts, you don't read these all verbatim. Find a way that's natural for you? Because like Ben, even hearing you read them off, it sounds very like scripted. I mean, because it
For
literally is. You're
sure.
reading off of a list, but weave these questions in. There's a ton of different ways to ask certain questions. Use the way that you talk. Use your own tonality and inflection of your voice to make this sound way more natural. Otherwise, you sound like you're reading off a script because you would be.
For sure. Right. So, and again, right, think about the process, right? We've got an opening, talked about the company. We've got some prospect focus questions. We learned about their operations. Now we've asked some challenge questions. We're kind of pushing a little bit to see if there's any stress in their operations, because the consequence question is meant to uncover the pain and the problem of choosing cheaper carriers or not caring who they choose, right?
Yep.
So some of these are, if you let price be the only factor you use, how might it affect your business in the long run? What would happen if a carrier picked up without proper insurance and they had an accident or a claim for that matter, right? What does it do to your customer schedule when you got to push back a delivery time? What happens when carriers don't let you know when they're going to be late or having issues? This is one of my favorites. Are you personally held responsible for the trucks you book on your loads? What would happen if you were unable to find a truck during your busy season? How do rates affect the quality of carriers you use? What would happen if a carrier took a load and didn't have the right insurance, right? That question is forcing somebody to tell you what happens in the worst case scenario, right, of their own decisions, which is making them realize that they've got a lot more, call it culpability or responsibility in what their service is as a company as it relates to shipping, because of the choices they are directly making. And most people will disassociate responsibility from the choices they make. Oh, it's not my fault that truck didn't show up. It's not my fault our loads deliver late all the time, right?
Yep. Let's take a quick break here and give a shout out to our friends over at Lean Solutions Group. Is your freight brokerage hiring? You've got to check out Lean Solutions Group, the industry leader in nearshore staffing for logistics companies with offices in South America, Mexico, and the Philippines. They offer a wide range of roles from back office operations to web development and marketing. Partner with the best. Visit www.leangroup.com to learn more. That's LEAN group.com. All right, so these consequence questions, these are some of the most powerful ones in my opinion, because you're able to, somehow like call the prospect out without being like confrontational about it.
For sure, right? Really skilled salespeople, right? It is really pretty simple. What they're doing is they're asking questions to uncover a pain, right, in a way that doesn't seem obvious, so that that person mentally goes back to that situation. And then they should be scratching at that pain to make that person, that their prospect, feel that pain to the point where it's almost unbearable. And once they get to that point, now they're offering a solution as if like they've had it there all along, so that the prospect comes to the decision as a natural conclusion of their own thought process, not you convincing them. Like that is the sales process, right? So now to your point, once you've challenged them and you've let them see their consequences, if you're really good at this, the more you practice it, you take people back to that instance. Like I'll take a customer or prospect, go like, so wait a minute, when was the last load that shipped that didn't pick up on time? When was that? Last Tuesday. Was it going to anybody important? Was it going to any customers? You guys like were like high priority customers for your sales team? Oh yeah, it went there. It was a huge issue. What happened? And I'll say, just like that sounds cheesy, but I'm like, did your sales team send you an email? Did you get an angry phone call? Like literally what happened? Take me back. I mean, like, did that blow up on you? Was your manager pissed? Did you get written up? Was there a doc in your, like, what happened? You want them in that scenario, in their head mentally, as if it just happened, because now it feels real. Now I'm going to go to the solution and be like, well, I mean, you're telling me that broker dropped 2 loads this month. That happened to you on Tuesday. You guys have been using them for how long? Let me ask you, if I could provide better communication and maybe one point of contact, could you give me a couple of trial loads, right? There's my close. It's the obvious solution. Hey, if I could provide, or I could demonstrate a solution, right, where maybe the communication gaps that you're telling me about, could I earn an opportunity to work with you? If I could be a little more dependable or reliable on your shipments, Do you think I could get a couple loads to show you what I could do, as a
What I want
trial
to point
run?
out, what you're doing here is you're asking for the sale, which I think a lot of people don't do. They go through a lot of their cold call questions, and they get all this information, and they don't actually ever ask for the sale at the end of it, and
For
it's a
sure.
really big mistake. But at the end of the day, you've got to ask. If you don't ask to be able to, like you call them, trial loads, or get involved in their daily load list if you're going to go that route, or ask them if there's anything on their desk today or right now that they're having struggle with, or they want an extra set of eyes on. Or, would it be okay if I quoted a couple of your existing lanes just to keep your current brokers honest, to make sure that you
Love
understand?
that
Like,
one.
I'm not asking for the freight. I just want to make sure that I give you honest feedback on what the market's doing versus your existing, bullpen of brokers.
For sure, be helpful, right? But you do have to ask for the business, right? Like you need to ask for a load. That is one of my go-to ones. Hey, you got anything on your desk I could take a look at now? Maybe I can run a quote for you while we're talking, save you the time from having to send it out. I'm not suggesting you use us. We just kind of just met, or even we've just been talking for a few weeks. But hey, I'm more than happy to, give you my thoughts on this, and maybe it'll help compare it to your other brokers to make sure you're still getting decent rates. Hey, not suggesting you send anything to me right now, but you got anything over the next week or two that we might be able to run where I can show you some of the things we've been talking about and see if we might be a fit to work together, right? Keep it kind of low pressure, like again, as if like it doesn't matter whether you get it or not, but you do have to ask, right? If you're not asking, do not assume they know that you need or want a load to run, right? They might be thinking, oh, this guy just wants to work with me when I have this need. Well, I'll let him know when I do. Right.
Yeah. And I'll add into the, and this is before the close, but when you ask some of these, like the consequence questions that lead up to this, leverage your other calls that you've made that, that day or that week, and roll them in. Like if you've been hearing that, issues X, Y, and Z are popping up, and some of them are universal because it's economically driven. Like I had a guy peak like post pandemic, freaking tight capacity, tight market, right? I was golfing with the guy, and it was just like he was like spewing out stuff to me, but I'm like, you guys deal with the same capacity crisis that everyone else has right now. And he just went off. He's like, oh, man, he's like, we can't find a truck. They, we book one, then they somehow break down and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, they didn't break down. They probably found a higher paying load. But like, yeah. I say that stuff because you hear the stories from other people and your own experiences. You could tell that as a compelling story to a prospect. People remember stories, in my opinion, a lot better than just a regular conversation. Stories are very, very memorable.
I would say the most valuable technique and resource in sales is a story, right? Because if I tell you something, especially if I disagree with you, right? It's me versus you. If I agree with you, okay, great. It's still just us talking. But a third party story holds twice as much weight as an opinion does, right? And it's a great example, right? Oh, Nate, so you're telling me, oh, your load's picked up late because the trucks keep breaking down. Another customer of mine was telling me the same thing. Jimmy said it happened to him for like a month or two. And you know what we found out when it was all said and done? None of those trucks broke down. There's another facility that ships similar lanes that was paying a lot more money. And every single truck he booked was just going and picking up with them. And once he found out, he doesn't work with them anymore. But I mean, long story short, we found where they were all breaking down, right? That person will remember that. That person doesn't have to believe it's my opinion, right? They're taking the value, right, of it coming from another person, even though it's me saying it. And they're going to remember it a lot longer than me just saying, oh, I will make sure that doesn't happen. Use me instead. How does he know? I mean, based on what? You know what I mean? Based on the phone calls or a couple conversations he had with me? He doesn't know me enough to trust me that I'm not going to do the same thing.
Exactly. So I don't know where you would group these. The questions that I'll kind of bring up now is sort of like the administrative portion of getting onboarded, right? I like to understand how that works. Who's the decision maker? What is the process? How long does it take? Are there any special contract requirements? Any special insurance requirements? These are all things that the larger the company is, the more likely this will be a more robust discussion and can take quite a bit of time. Where would you personally put these questions, or would you vary it based on the conversation?
I would put those closer to qualifying because this has a lot to do with understanding how much time you have, right? And what I mean by that is how much time you can expect it to take to turn this prospect into a customer where it's valuable to your business, right? And some of these, like, again, you're trying to save time later and frustration. So if you find out that it's a long process that happens twice a year, right? Okay, now you know how to align your calls with this time of year. And there are some companies that literally will only open their doors to new vendors like once or twice a year in their bid season. And they're like, hey,
Yep.
if you don't make it this one, you got to wait next year. So you want to ask those questions early on, close to, I think, when you're qualifying, at least some of them, like understanding the overall process. Who's involved?
There's
Who's
some
the decision maker?
non-negotiables, right? Like, for example, if a customer's like, we're only doing EDI, for our top vendors right now.
Yep.
Like, if you don't have EDI capability or the money to pay for the integration, not worth it. Another thing is like insurance. Some of these larger companies, for various reasons, they want ridiculous insurance limits, like 5 million total, requiring like a $3 million umbrella policy. Those are extremely expensive policies, especially when you have a high volume of business in your brokerage, that you're going to want to pay $100,000 a year for insurance when you don't even know what kind of business you're going to get. And this is just to be able to like quote them. Right.
And that's
It's
the whole
insane.
thing, right? As a freight, and I've had both of those happen to me. One of my former customers, when I went to onboard them again later, increased their insurance requirement to $10 million. And I think our quote for that policy was like $167,000. And here's the kicker, right? You're not guaranteed any business. You're going to front that money, to your point. I'm going to pay $167,000 in the hopes that maybe they give me some business, right? Like that is a big risk. And that is something you're going to want to know a lot sooner rather than later, right?
Yep. One last category of questions, and I'll let you wrap it up, that is oftentimes left out of training, but in my opinion is extremely valuable, are non-business related questions. Okay. Get to know the person on the other end of that phone, right? What motivates them? What makes them, what are they kind of like, what's their tick? And like, what are they, what kind of like gets them off the rocker? And we talk about this a ton with just sales in general and openers, is like, it could be as cheesy and simple as like, how's the weather, right? Or like talk about sports. Like, hey, what do you think about them damn Buffalo Bills on Monday night? You know what I mean? You can literally have any kind of like icebreaker question that's non-business related. And sometimes those will turn into like 10, 15 minute BS sessions where you're just building rapport before you even start talking. It's awesome. But they're extremely effective in my opinion.
And if anybody's a fan of this show, in the years we've been doing this, we've never done an episode with me reading these questions for that reason, because this isn't really how you get a customer. This isn't really the meat of how you build trust. It's important, and yes, it helps you, and it will give you a good roadmap through these calls. But to me, it's far more important to be able to connect with them as a human being than to discuss their operations and to be able to do some of these things, right? Yep. Like I've seen more customers come from what you're saying than anything else, than operational understanding. Oh, they're a Bills fan and you're a Bills fan. Like there was an example, I've told this in the story. I was doing a training at a company, and the week before they did an internal one where like their top sales broker like just made a cold call in front of a bunch of people, and he spent 11 minutes talking, it was Monday, talking about the games on Sunday. And then minute and a half to 2 minutes talking about some details. And it was a one call close, which again, rarely if ever happens on our industry. But again, the guy connected with them really quickly. They were bonding. They had a bullshit session for 10, 11 minutes. And then they're like, yeah, send me your details. We can start working with you. We'll send you some loads to quote. Hangs up the phone and everybody's like, well, I don't understand what he did. All he did was talk about football on Sunday and they worked with him. That's it, right? Like that's how you get the trust. You get somebody that wants to work with you because they know, like, and trust you. The rest is just details. So to me, getting to know them and their human side of things, what they're interested in, what their passion is in, what they're doing on the weekend. Do they have kids? What do they do outside of work? Is far more valuable than getting somebody to talk about their operational things.
Exactly, man. Can't agree more. Good stuff. Good questions. Good questions to ask, right? You got anything else on this topic before we put a lid on it?
No, I think we've covered it and at least given everybody some examples of each types of question they could ask through their journey and the length of the journey they should expect to be on before they're going to start getting some business from anybody as well.
Yep. And let us know too if you guys have any questions that you really like to ask, or you're curious if it's a good question to ask. Drop us a line. Send us an email, info@freight360.net. Hit us up on Facebook, on our Facebook group, on our website, YouTube comments. You can snail mail us if you can figure out what our address is. But yeah, let us know.
Well, the other thing too, I think we might actually put these in the downloadable section on our website so that anybody can go and get them and access them.
Yep.
I don't know, kicking around that idea. So that could be coming down the pipe.
For sure. Good deal. Any final thoughts, Mr. Kowalski?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, come on, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.